we are here to celebrate the greatest day of the year, World Backup Day. So excited that you all made the time. We're here with a very special guest, and we are talking about cyber response missteps that could cost you. So we really appreciate you guys making the time today. I know everyone's got busy schedules. We're going to give a lot of power-packed info that I expect that you're going to find valuable. And just in terms of housekeeping, we're going to record this. It will be available for you afterwards. If you got questions along the way, use the chat, and we'll be doing a Q&A at the end. One other special little feature of today's show is if you do want to stick around at the end, we are also going to be doing a quick demo of Enable Backup. So we'll give you some insights into what that is. That's not what today's show is about primarily, but often we get the request afterwards. So we're going to tack on an extra 5 or 10 minutes at the end for that. So without further ado, I'd like to make some introductions. If we want to advance the slides here.
Yes. House rules.
Yes. So yeah, I think we covered this. Everyone's on mute. So if you're speaking to us, we won't be listening. But the overall purpose and goals is what we're going to talk about. 3 things today, folks. Preparing for ransomware attacks, ransomware negotiations, and if you're in that situation, what incident response looks like and what it potentially can cost. So that's where we're headed. In terms of who's going to be leading this, Rob Fitzgerald's on the line with us today. Hello, Rob.
Hey, Chris. Hey, Stefan. Happy World Backup Day. Super excited to be here. I'm the founder of Arcus Risk Management, and we specialize in helping MSPs and their clients implement cybersecurity risk management and compliance programs.
And so yeah, we ran into Rob about 6 weeks ago, maybe a little bit more, and it was on the topic of offsite backups and secure ways of helping people through both preventing and incident response for ransomware and other types of cyber attacks. So when we had this great conversation, we thought this would be a perfect topic to share with the broader audience. So that's where we went. Also with us, we have my wingman. Collectively, Stefan and I are known internally at Enable as the Backup Boys. And Stefan, maybe a quick introduction of yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, guys. So Stefan Voss. I actually just joined Enable. Very excited to be here. It's such a cool company, cool product, responsible for all things data protection. And I actually had the privilege to create a product out of nothing, right? So a real entrepreneurial venture. It happened at EMC at the time, and it was off the backdrop of the Sony attack. So it was well published, the hack of the century. Customers approached us, hey, how do we recover from a disaster like this? And I was able to productize a product called Cyber Recovery, where pretty much I learned the ropes on all things, what's the minimally viable product. I worked with security folks like Rob very closely on the requirements and how to bring the world of cyber security and backup or data protection together. So very exciting.
So a couple of great resources we have, and great to have you with us, Stefan, joining the company. Just I think it was November you came in. Myself, on the other hand, I'm the general manager for our data protection business here at Enable, and I have kind of been around for over 10 years now. So been doing this for quite a while with the company, and having a lot of fun, seeing a lot of change, and certainly a lot of positive momentum these days. So that's who's on the show today. And so let's kick things off by doing a quick poll here. So this is the audience participation moment. We got one quick question for you. What's the #1 tool to minimize the impact of a ransomware attack? So you guys can go ahead and fill that in. We'll flash up the results in just a minute. And while that's happening, maybe Robert, just can you want to share like a little bit of background sort of and how you came to be here, some of the experiences you've had with different organizations?
Sure. I back in 2001, I launched my first cybersecurity company. Within a few years, we became a well-known local provider here in New England for digital forensics and in particular expert witness testimony. I've worked on hundreds of incident responses, and I've testified in state and federal court around the country. I've written many affidavits, been deposed, and really helped explore a lot of different types of attacks. In the beginning, in the early years, it was very focused on insider threat, embezzlement, fraud. But obviously, with the growth of nation-state attacks and just even malicious gangs like ransomware hackers, I've worked on many different cases. After I sold that company, I joined Big Consulting, PwC, and then moved over to Mandiant. Finally working at a large MSP here in the East Coast, Green Pages, before going out and launching Arcus Risk Management to help MSPs with supporting and services.
Right on. Well, that's great context. We got our poll results coming up on the screen here. Any surprises in what you see here? 69% of people took backup as the #1 tool. Coming in second place, AV and EDR. And then distant third, fourth, and fifth are firewall, MFA, and SOC.
Well, it's interesting. It's exciting to see. I mean, I have been beating the drum on this for a while, so it's really exciting to see. Here we go. It's exciting to see that people are taking backups a lot more seriously. Prior to COVID, I would have said, and this is having worked on tons and tons of incidents, the #1 way to mitigate ransomware attack would have been MFA. And then from there, I would have said AV, EDR, firewalls, and SOC monitoring, right? 24/7 SOC monitoring. But what we saw happen as everyone went remote during COVID, remote offsite backups, and in particular, like trusted offsite backups, became a critical foundation to protecting against ransomware. And quite frankly, it was at that point in time that backups as a category, as a job responsibility, kind of moved from IT operations really into security. And so what we're seeing now is, if you want to mitigate the impact of ransomware, having trusted offsite backups is the #1 thing you can do. And I will beat this drum continually. I've been beating this drum for 2 years now, but it's important. Does it make sense to you and to you, Chris, and you, Stefan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Stefan, you came through a very different route in terms of, more traditional appliance type business and then the local backups, and had to take on this, or took the pleasure of taking on this subject matter. Maybe share some of your, before and after perspective. Oh, we got a mute.
Try to be polite, and then you don't hear the background, but you don't hear it at all, so I apologize. But yeah, I definitely see the same things, Rob. It's arguably a different segment, enterprise, but the requirements are the same. Small and large, right? Different verticals. And the notion is, if you can isolate, you can actually reduce your attack surface. It's harder to get to. And we all know that attackers are going after backups specifically. So the more you kind of remove it from that attack surface, the better. And then, of course, MFA solves for that. Sort of credential harvesting and impersonation and so forth. So it's a very good sort of twofer, right? We see very much.
I'm going to switch to the next slide here, but as we go, I want everyone in the audience to think about this. One of the questions that I would have counsel ask whoever was up on the stand, the IT expert, the CIO, whoever, without MFA, how can you prove that it was Stefan using his credentials at his computer? How can you prove that it wasn't someone else? It wasn't his kid. It wasn't his significant other. It wasn't someone that broke in and stole the creds and just had access to the computer. How do you prove that? And without MFA, it's not possible to prove. And so it becomes really interesting when we think about that. Interestingly enough, right, over the past 2 years, cyber insurance companies, these are Chubb, Travelers, Beasley, Evolve, they have all been pummeled by filings from insureds because of ransomware and cyber attacks. There are approximately 10 questions or so that are across every new application, whether it's, hey, we're starting a business and we want to get cybersecurity insurance for the first time, or we need to renew our cyber insurance policy or policies are coming up. Do you have multi-factor authentication? Are you backing up on-prem at least once a week? Do you have antivirus in place and firewalls in place? Do you have callback processes, policies, and procedures? This specific one over here, callback verification process, tries to mitigate and minimize the damage from Beck attacks, right? Business email compromise. Me pretending to be Stefan, sending an email to Chris, saying, Chris, you got to move there's a new account that you have to make the payments to. It's this account number here. Please make those payments. But again and again and again, it comes back to, do you back up at least weekly to an off-site location? And I want to really hit on this, because further on, they come back with a catch-22 type question, which is, can you recover all of your business critical data and systems within 10 days? Not 10 business days, within 10 days. And if I'm a ransomware attacker, the first thing I'm going to do when I come in is look for any on-prem backups that you possibly have and either delete them completely or encrypt them. Chris, do you have some thoughts on, have you worked with clients? I know you guys are doing a ton on that, on the offsite, trusted offsite backup stuff.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I would say, first of all, the frequency in terms of which our tools are used with respect to this it's a daily occurrence. With respect to the questions that are being asked from the cyber insurers, I'm sort of my first reaction when I saw them was that, like, they've set the bar awfully low. Backing up offsite once a week. We tend to think in like terms of hours, not even days, let alone weeks. And then secondly, 10 days to recover. I mean, there's this notion out there of like instant recovery or super low RTO. In chatting with you, certainly some insights came out. And Stefan, maybe from your perspective, I know we're going to probably speak to this a little bit later as well, but just around that attack vectors, not just the backup data, I remember you saying, but around the metadata, maybe some insights there.
Yeah, for sure. So when you think about the anatomy of an attack, I do the credential harvesting. Whether I'm an inside actor, by the way, it could also just be that, right? Or whether I steal your credentials, now I'm in, what do I do? And a very effective technique, as you know, from NotPetya and others, is to take out the foundation services, right? Go after your ability to run IT. So it's not just about mission critical VMs or databases. Data is actually also the underlying foundation, and that, of course, inevitably includes the backup catalog, because if you think about it, I can cripple your ability to recover, right? When I take that out. So I work with a large global insurance provider, and they categorize their backup catalog, among others, as their tier 0, the most important set of their business critical data. So just thinking about data a little bit more holistically, and then making sure that it too is protected and off-site, removed from that attack surface, I thought was another thing that customers in my previous world very often brought up.
And I think that's a big piece, and it's funny because they then the insurance, and this is going to show up for anyone who is looking for cyber insurance, and for many organizations that are looking to purchase or repurchase business disruption service. It's not just, hey, I want cybersecurity, because there are some companies that are going to say, you know what, it's too expensive, or I don't want to do all of these things. It's also business disruption service. They're going to come back and be asking, and then they hit you with, do you have any grounds or suspect for circumstances that might give rise to a claim? Do you have any reason to think that something is wrong right now that you could that could create a claim situation? And then it comes back to, in the last 5 years, has the organization suffered any type of intrusion, tampering, et cetera, where there was a claim for more than $25,000? And this again ties back to business critical data systems within 10 days. To Chris's point, they're going to be looking to squeeze that, right? We're starting in 2022 with, all right, are you backing up at least once a week? My guess is by 2025, they're going to be saying, are you backing up at least every other day? And my guess is by 2027, they'll be saying, do you have daily backups in place? Which means MSPs and organizations need to be effectively planning the future of technology now, because this all takes budgeting, right? It takes time and it takes budgeting, and they need to start planning that now so that they can be ready for the next hurdle, to Chris's point, which is going to come in a year or 2 years. So, what were you going to say?
It parlays perfectly into kind of like that checklist sort of approach of understanding like where we are, where we're headed.
And I think this is one of the key things, right? When we're coming out and we're talking about compliance and risk management with customers, we're like, listen, there's 3 categories that you really need to think about when it comes to ransomware. Backups. Do you have backups in place? And we're going to talk a little bit about why backups first become so important. Do you have an MFA in place, multi-factor authentication? What are you running for AV and or EDR? And by the way, Windows Defender is fine as a solution here. And not only has that product continued to get better, but also organizations need to best cost maximize the value of the tool stack that they're buying. What do you have for a firewall in place? Are you using firewalls? Are you using 24/7 security monitoring, right? All really good things here. And what that leads to is, more importantly than just the tools, do you have an information security plan? Is there policies around when things are backed up, how they're backed up, who's responsible for the backups, when and how and where MFA is applied, who's handling the 24/7 monitoring and what they're responsible for, and who's looking at the alerts that are sent over the wall to say, hey, this looks like it could be something suspicious, and what's that time frame? What's your incident response plan? What's the difference between an IT event, a security event, and a security incident? And how is your organization detailing that? Do you have insurance in place? Do you have crime insurance in place? A lot of organizations don't, especially in the SMB market space, that maybe don't have insurance teams to buy in or evaluate insurance policies, don't realize that cybersecurity insurance and cybercrime insurance are 2 very different types of insurance, and the insurers are going to want money for both of them. And then, what does your team look like, right? Who are you calling when you have an event? Do you have a breach attorney, an incident response team? Do you know who your insurance broker is, or is it just someone that you found on the web that you never talked to? What's the IT team going to be doing? Do you need crisis management or PR services? All of these, when it comes to compliance management and preparation, these are the conversations that we're having with clients, that more times than not, they're not able to complete this checklist, and that's what we're helping them with.
And that's a great point. I think for our audience, in terms of MSPs, like the tools are probably like well known. The part about the expanding like responsibility and scope of the team and who's part of that team, and the governance side of things is probably the area where there's been a massive amount of change in terms of the scope of responsibility that tends to be looked at from SMBs to their MSP to understand these things. So really helpful to see that. So I see now we've transitioned to incident response. So at this point, I think we're just going to flash another quick poll for the audience and dig in a little deeper. So the question is about paying for ransomware. So if you or one of your clients was hit by ransomware, would you pay the ransom? So simple yes, no, nice and easy.
This here is, I have seen this be a holy war in the boardroom. I have been in many boardrooms where we've had to have these discussions. By the way, a really crazy thing to think about is most people in IT will never come across a ransomware situation, which is both good and bad, right? It means either they haven't been a target, or they've implemented the tools and policies and procedures enough that there was maybe an attempt, but things stopped. But it's also bad because it gives people a false sense of security that it won't happen to them or their organization, and it usually creates an emotional sort of pull, anger, resentment, fear. That most people that are victims don't fully understand or appreciate or comprehend until sometimes months later, because they're not prepared for it. All right, what are the poll results?
Yeah, well, this is a line my mom always taught me, not to negotiate with terrorists or with a 3-year-old. And it looks like in the same view applies to ransomware. 92% said no, I would not pay the ransom.
Wow. Wow. Let me just say, it's really, wow. All right. So let's talk about some ransomware facts. First and foremost, ransomware has become commercialized. If you haven't heard this, there is ransomware as a service that organizations, crime syndicates can just purchase and lease and use, that allow non-technical gangs to deploy and use it. Ransomware gangs use intermediaries, customer service bureaus to manage the negotiation and payment process. This is to protect them, but it's also it's to protect them in a couple different ways. There's one, it protects them from getting caught, and two, or being tied back to directly, and two, by using a customer service bureau that may be outside of an area or outside of the realm of OFAC, it allows for ransomware payments to be made. What's the best time for a ransomware attack, Stefan?
Yesterday, or who knows, right? I just thought that went through my mind. What came up in other webinars that I was part of in the previous was sometimes we don't even know if we were attacked or our clients were attacked. So, when do we know, right? So there's always that concern about, are they already in the network? But I would say yesterday.
You're not wrong, right? Like we see a couple of big things that we see, right? Two big areas for much of the audience today. The first is anytime IT is going to be making a change. They want to roll out some new security hardware, some new security tools. We often see, boom, that's when they get hit. It's why having the backups in place first, the absolute first thing, is the best thing that you can do. Having that offsite trusted backup is critical. The second time that we see is when an acquisition is announced. And this can be, hey, a company is buying another company or being sold to another company. That we often see ransomware attacks happening then. We're seeing more and more ransomware attacks happen when customers move from one MSP to a new MSP. And it's an interesting dynamic because what we've seen play out is the customer blames the new MSP by saying, hey, we've been with these guys for 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, never had a problem. And now we move over to you, and on day one, we're hit with ransomware. Obviously, your system is infected. The reality is typically the gang has been inside and watching and monitoring and is looking for the most ideal opportunity. And that period of time when there's a transition is a period of chaos and a lack of defined responsibilities and ownership, boom, they hit you, and the client's stuck. They have to pay, and the MSP has to sometimes really explain to the business why it's happened. But ransomware is big business and it's growing. You know, we're seeing more and more, and we'll talk about this as we go, that as much as people have egos or a defined moral stance or whatever about not paying, it becomes incredibly difficult for a business not to pay the ransom. And it's the basic math on this is annual revenue divided by work days is the lost revenue per day. And so if you think about whatever your lost revenue per day, maybe your organization is smaller and you only make $5,000, $10,000 a day, or maybe you're making $100,000 a day or $5 million a day. As you're looking at this, it becomes harder and harder to cost justify not paying. So some of the things that we've been advising MSPs, and really this applies to internal IT teams, because I think more and more internal IT teams have recognized that they're not just IT, they're service bureaus inside their organization, but is focus on preserving evidence. When you're hit with ransomware or a cyber attack, yes, there is a responsibility to get the organization back up and running, but recognize, take a pause, recognize that there is a crime that is happening or happened or ongoing, and that as best as you can, you want to preserve evidence. If you just start deleting or, you know, insta restoring, and we'll talk a little bit about this later on, you're creating a potential world of hurt for the organization after the fact. Yes, you might be able to get them up and running in 4 minutes or less, but by doing that, if you're deleting evidence, one, you're destroying evidence, but two, you're putting your fingerprints, you're accepting ownership, liability, and financial responsibility for anything that happens beyond that, because the only evidence there is of the MSP or the internal IT team individuals literally working on the keyboard. Second thing, I strongly encourage organizations to get legal counsel engaged immediately. You're having a cyber attack. You think you're having a cyber attack. Let's get legal counsel on the phone. That can invoke attorney-client privilege, which allows MSPs, their employees, IT people at the customer and the customer to have open conversations about things that can't be brought into court. Without attorney-client privilege, organizations are stuck. It means that no matter what you say, what email you send, what text you send, what you fax over or back and forth between you and the client, that can be used against you in a court of law. And I promise you, if you're going up against me, not that we do this anymore, but if you're going up against me or my team back at my old company, we would use every single word against you. Every single word. Stefan, you've worked in this space as well. You know as well, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm making sure I completely agree. And, you know, I'm not as close on the sort of the legal aspect. So I'm learning a lot myself here, Rob, but of course, you know, we have features in our products around audit log for that very reason, so that you can reproduce and demonstrate good efforts, right? When you look at some of the guidance, and whether that's Fed Cert or whatever, it's kind of more conceptual in spirit, right? But I do think that when it comes to a specific implementation, you know, it doesn't get that prescriptive, but the more you can show good effort, I think the better off you'll be, right?
Audit logs and good effort. You just nailed something, and it's not here on the checklist, and it's really important, right? As you're working, capturing what you're doing to help through the IR, even if it's not an IR yet, capturing those records show good intent, good faith, and can protect you, regardless of whether or not attorney-client privilege is invoked. Once you get in counsel involved, you can have legal counsel suggest to legal counsel and the client executives to contact the insurance broker and then have the insurance broker contact or have the counsel contact the incident response team, whoever that is. If you have an incident response plan, it'll all be mapped out. If you need an incident response team, right, first, obviously, you can call Arcus, but more importantly, insurance is probably going to provide an IR team to help. But the reason the broker becomes so important is because, do you remember earlier when I was saying there's cybersecurity insurance, there's cyber crime insurance, there's business disruption insurance? Usually they are different policies. It's not one policy. And often it's not only different policies, it's different policies by different providers. So you might have 2 or 3 different providers, especially if the organization is national or global in nature. The victim is national or global in nature, where they're going to need to collaborate on determining how to best manage moving forward, but they'll also be reimbursing for costs. So if insurance coverage is involved, clients will be assigned a breach coach. That's what it's called. It's an attorney, a breach coach. An incident response or forensics team will be assigned if one hasn't already been engaged. Sometimes they replace them, sometimes they don't. If you're the MSP or the IT team, expect a lot of questions around security posture, backups, and logs. Logs are important for the audit piece, just as Stefan mentioned, and then work to support the incident response team. I can tell you, back in the day, when we would come in for IR, we would come in and be like, everyone out of the room, we're going to take control of all of this ourselves, et cetera, et cetera. The IT team's an idiot, the MSP is idiots. Now, today, it's a totally different work. We collaborate very closely with IT teams and with MSPs because all we're focused on as an IR company is the IR component. And you're going to see in a minute the amount of effort and work that goes in from an IT standpoint when IRs happen. Maybe. Here we go. So let's talk about that. Earlier, I had mentioned annual revenue divided by workdays is lost revenue per day, right? And that's important. Remember earlier I had said insurance companies want to know that you can get back up and running within 10 days. That's because they don't want to be paying for business disruption, the cost, the amount of money that you make on any given day, that the victim makes on any given day, for more than 10 days if they don't have to. I mean, they'd like to do it in 2 days if they could. But when we bring in the stack of teams or individuals that support an IR, across the top, you have legal counsel and advisory services. Sometimes they are tied directly to the insurance provider, the insurance company. Other times they're tied to the insured, the victim, your client. The insurance company is going to want to get involved because, again, there's going to be different pieces that may or may not be covered, and they're going to want to manage the cost and the process to ensure that it is done, that restoration remediation happens as fluidly as possible. And of course, there's always going to be IT support and remediation. And what's so interesting here is, again, remember earlier I had said, years ago, we would come in and say, everyone out of the room, we're going to take care of this. We'll work with the insurance company and be done. Now, we've fully embraced, and it's not just us, this is, I think, an industry norm, fully embraced working with MSPs, working with internal IT teams to say, you guys know this space better. Your teams know the client better. You know the network better. You know where weaknesses can be. Let's keep you fully engaged as we walk through this. The hard part is for most MSPs, when there's an IR, you're pulling people away from other projects, other work, their daily workload to stay focused on this. And I don't want to say it's 24/7. Sometimes it is, but in an operationally engaged way. When we come in, we're hitting on first visibility. What can we see? We need agents. We need to be able to see what the damage is. Let's protect the stuff that hasn't been impacted. Let's control the damage as quickly as possible and start to mitigate it, and then remediate, clean up, delete the malware, the ransomware, whatever we have to do. All during that process, we're doing analysis on what's happening, and as needed, we will handle the ransomware negotiations. And so here's that piece where a lot of organizations don't realize, right? Every day the victim doesn't pay, the victim loses money. Very quickly, the ransom demand is cheaper than the losses. So if you don't want to pay, 92%, I think, Chris, is what you said, is that correct?
92% said they would not pay.
They would not pay, right? Well, that's fine, but how are you going to make payroll? How are you going to pay your vendors? How are you going to make that loan payment if you can't have access to your ERP system, if you can't have access to your delivery systems? And you know, how are you going to handle helping any clients that might rely on that service? Let's say you're a SaaS company, or you're providing payroll services, like a recent attack. Now all of a sudden you're having a direct and immediate impact on the livelihood, or on the business viability of other organizations. All of this is cleverly done by design by the ransomware gang to ensure that they get paid.
So that last point highlighted the ransomware negotiations. This is an area I haven't heard much about previously, in terms of that's a negotiation is actually part of the play. Maybe just give us like just a brief insight into what that looks like, because I bet you for the audience that might be some new information.
So the good and the bad is you can sometimes negotiate the ransomware demand amount. In fact, often you can negotiate the ransomware demand amount. There are exceptions, but for the most part, we negotiate ransomware demand amounts all the time. Let's talk about what that looks like. How a lot of organizations don't fully understand that ransomware negotiations take time. On average, it's about 12 days to negotiate and make and pay a ransom demand and get a key back. If you don't want to negotiate at all, you can absolutely reduce the number of days to probably 5. If you do want to negotiate, it could take 2 weeks or a month even to negotiate. You know, the first couple things that we want all victims to be thinking about, and the IT teams and MSPs that support them, the MSSPs and VARs that support them, is determine where the client data is, on which servers are they on, what applications are most important, prioritize those, prioritize the systems, and determine the value of the data. The thing is, right, there's all of these steps that are required, and more, but basically all of these steps that are required to go through. And even just, we come up with a demand, we come up with an amount of money. As a victim, you need to wire money to an organization like ours or any other that can make the payment. They need to then wire that to the to Coinbase or Kraken or one of the other exchanges. They then need to convert the money into cryptocurrency, reach back out to the gang, let them know that they're ready, ask for the updated wallet information, send the wallet, send a test, and here you go. Well, you wiring money to me, that's 1 day. That's 24 hours right there. Me wiring money to the exchange, that's another 24 hours. So right now you're talking 2 days just to do the wiring. Then, depending on the volatility of the market, I might not be able to get the type of cryptocurrency that's needed. So it can be, if the market's running wild, up or down, it's going to take a longer time. If you're looking for cryptocurrency that isn't Bitcoin, it's maybe Monero, it's going to take a longer amount of time before I'm able to even acquire all of the cryptocurrency that I'm going to need. Also, let's be really clear, as much as these exchanges are growing in popularity, people have apps they can trade on their phone, the infrastructure of these environments are not as stable as, say, NASDAQ or Amex, right? Like there's a lot of work that needs to come along. So sometimes we just lose access to the exchange. Let's talk about expenses, right? Because I think this is the other thing. We read all these reports, Verizon, Ponymon, whoever, right? They come out and they're like, oh, a health record is $242 or whatever it is, or it now costs $12 million if you have a data breach. I think when we're looking at an organization that's super large, those numbers make sense. But when we're looking at the SMB, anything outside of the Fortune 500, let's talk about what I see. And obviously this can range and for a lot of different reasons, the size or scope of the organization, 100 machines versus 10,000 machines that are endpoints that are impacted. But typically what we've been seeing is an IR is about 300 hours. A current hourly rate, based on what we know, this is middle of the road, is about $450 an hour for incident response services. I know many organizations are significantly higher than that, and I know many organizations that are lower than that. The problem is it's not always about the hourly rate. Doesn't matter if the hourly rate is $50 an hour if it's going to take you 2,000 hours. It matters how quickly you can get the organization back up and running, Chris. So you're probably looking at about 135 to 150,000 in incident response costs. During that period of time, the IR team, whoever they are going to need help with IT. It is everything from getting reports, turning machines back on, updating licenses, or buying tools to get them running so they can get the information they need. We're probably talking about another 160 hours. A lot of times I see emergency IT support be run at about $300 an hour, so that's another 50K. Legal counseling, it's funny, legal counseling runs all over the place, but we used an average hourly rate of $500 an hour. Now, interestingly enough, I have yet to work on an IR that has included only a single attorney. Most of the IRs that we worked on use 2 attorneys, and some have used 3. So even if the hourly rate is $250 an hour times 2 attorneys, that's $500 an hour. This 500 hours is strictly, this is not for advisory services or anything else. This is strictly to manage any conversations. We ballparked based on a bunch of conversations that we did, 10 hours per state. So this is to talk to the 50 attorney general's offices in the United States. If you have a HIPAA, you have a PII, or you have a PCI breach that impacts, every one of the attorney generals are going to reach out. The attorneys are going to have to work on filling out forms. There's not a standard form, completing responses and getting it back. And we estimate that to be about 10 hours per state. This does not include a lot of stuff. So you can see we're at $450,000 just to get started. It doesn't include forensics tools. It doesn't include a ransomware negotiation fee or the ransomware demand fee. It doesn't include hunting for attribution, regulatory fines, remediation, or any of the litigation that can come from state or federal government or even customers. More and more customers are suing victims because of the business impact to the customer that the victim's negligence, as they use, or lack of preparedness has caused the damages that have caused the customer.
That's really great context, like understanding like what underlies that, like 500 hours as an example, and that it's talking to 50 states. We know a lot of our MSPs are serving healthcare, serving financial services, and understanding like the broadness of that impact is really good. But to transition then, like, so let's say we're still with the 92% where we're saying no, we're not going to pay it. Now there's still the legal aspect. but obviously we're not negotiating and going to different cryptocurrency exchanges. Maybe we could just talk a bit more on, or flip the conversation over to the backup side of things and learn more, talk about more about what that incident response looks like from that perspective.
I love it. Hey, it's World Backup Day. I love this because this is the secret. It's crazy. This is a secret weapon, right? 2 years ago, I would have said MFA is the secret weapon. What we are seeing, right? In traditional environments, we have organizations that back up to local storage, and then more savvy traditional environments, you have local storage backing up offsite, which can be effective. The problem is, if I'm an attacker, I am going after the local storage and the offsite. And I don't even have to go after the offsite. I can just go after the local storage, back up a bunch of copies from local storage to overwrite whatever is offsite without even thinking about it. The modern day, and we've worked on multiple IRs where modern cloud first backup has saved organizations exponentially. Usually what we're seeing is when you use a two-prong approach, when you use the local backups and you use separately offsite storage, it's trusted. What's amazing is we don't need to pay that ransom. We can pull back everything that we need from the cloud backups. So not only can we avoid or at least reduce the amount of ransom that we're willing to pay, we can actually get up and running very, very quickly. The biggest limiter is the size of the pipe, but most organizations today have decent sized pipes, and there's multiple ways that we can work around that to use multiple locations to back up and create backups and then roll it out. This can reduce downtime exponentially when it comes to ransomware. Sorry.
Chris,
Mr. Voss?
Yeah, I was going to just
with a question, but
no, just share some just building it. It's exciting, right, to hear Rob, kind of talk about this with so much passion, and I definitely share that passion. One of the challenges, I'm very close to that approach on the left because I was the product lead for it. Is that obviously you're building something off of a kind of a traditional backup infrastructure. The backup infrastructure, the first copy will by default tend to be on premise. So therefore, it's by default on the same network as the malware that's trying to attack you, right? And so any guidance you'll read, whether that's FBI, will say good offsite backups are great. And then you get into tape, but tape is like a nightmare to restore, can be, because you got to always find very specific data, which, and then you have the restore, the media, right? And that's complicated, right? So, for certainly designing around isolation, air gapping, replicating is good. It's a good practice. And it's out there. Oftentimes we see retention lock or worm locking implemented, right? These immutable copies come up, but these are in a way also workarounds, because when I have the primary copy on the same network as I have to do something. So making them immutable is kind of an obvious choice. The problem is what we're seeing is low-level attacks actually still go after the backup infrastructure. I just take out the server. I do a maintenance job, and I just can kill the box, whether it's the target or the backup server or any combination of the two. So therefore, you have to actually replicate not only the copies, but also the backup catalog. And then what we typically ran into most of the time, it's isolated, but it takes like an army to manage. It becomes so complex because now you have a dark side, right? How do I patch? How do I patch that? So that's complicated. Now I have to talk to the vendor, coordinate, get a maintenance window, find a way to get the payload, right? Because obviously the infrastructure that's in the dark side needs to be secure as well. You can't just be at a lower patch level and then have it be vulnerable when that's your last line of right? So you can kind of see how it's a little bit of a bolt on. And if we think that we want to get our lives back, and this needs to be something that combines the principle of being pragmatic about having an offsite copy, but also I need to have maybe one technician being able to manage this entire thing, you know, the approach on the right starts making a lot of sense. It's an architectural discussion more than, it's not a product pitch, but it's something we have to just think about. How do we architect most elegantly so we can actually manage it and still get the benefit?
So to me, and I'm gonna jump because I wanna make sure we have enough time for everything. But I think it's an architectural solution, but it's a risk management discussion. This is not necessarily an IT business. This is a business discussion, and it's critical that people realize that there is added business risk using the traditional image-based server backup solution. There just is. You can reduce it, get the same / better effect by reducing it and splitting, sharing the risk load of where data is being backed up. You know, one of the things that we've seen, and this is another thing that we see a lot of, oh, instant recovery. Hey, you know what? We're just going to restore it. I see this is happening. We're just going to restore it. The problem is, right, not only does just restoring it put your bloody fingerprints on the evidence, there's now no place else to go, but also when you're doing an instant recovery, you're not really cleaning up, you're just brushing dust under the carpet, as they say, right? Like, you're not really cleaning up or fixing what's going to happen. It will come back. It's going to pop up its ugly head, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. By getting on top of it, you can make sure that you're not violating any of the federal requirements or state requirements as it comes to reporting. You can ensure that you're not showing, negligence by saying, hey, listen, we can do an instant backup, but it's going to be over here in a clean environment, and we'll test it and run it over here. We can't just instant backup and try and cover up this mistake. The fines become exponentially greater, whether it be regulatory fines or clients, again, suing for damages and liability, because when you cross that line to say, we're not going to tell anyone, we're going to just cover this up, we're going to hide it. The contractual, it used to be that I was afraid of HIPAA, FINRA, and all of the other regulations, PCI regulations. I'm still greatly concerned, but more and more, the organizations that we're working with, we're recognizing that they have in their sales contracts actual agreements that talk about reporting times, responsibilities, and organizations have intentionally or unintentionally accepted a level of risk, so once that they're not tracking and not following. And so this idea, like, hey, we can just restore it and no one's going to know and let's just move on, that is a very, very costly approach, especially when, not if, when it comes out to light that, hey, you knew that you had a problem, and instead of doing the right thing and getting in line and following your IR plan, you just decided to cover it over.
Yeah, I just had a stat to support your point, Rob. So I did a panel at the RSA conference with the CISO of one of the larger credit card companies. It was very interesting. It was all Q&A driven, and basically was asked, well, what about your posture in restoring back to production? He said, I cannot legally do it. Our risk and compliance team will not allow me to restore back into production because, one, the risk of rehydration or reinfecting is too big. And then, it also your notion around tampering. So, and then the corresponding statistic, we had about 1,000 customers, large enterprise for the cyber recovery, and the 60 to 70% of them restored into a clean room first before they would restore back into production. As pragmatic as restoring as fast as possible, instant back into production, most realize that you need to have sort of that clean room, do some remediation testing to make sure it is safe to actually restore the payload back into production. Otherwise, it's kind of irresponsible.
So, and being aware of that, that dwell time that does exist with these actors, that they're going to make a return trip, and like the easiest way is to get a repeat customer.
Right. So right, the easiest customer is a repeat customer, and their dwell time is what, 70, depending on the report you read, 70, 80, 130 days. So resorting back to yesterday or 5 minutes ago, not without any plan, you're in trouble. Look, the key thing here is get prepared for ransomware now. If you're an MSP or you're an internal IT team, talk to management, talk to your clients, get them to understand that we're likely to get hit with ransomware. We need to protect from it now. I'm hoping that you don't get hit with ransomware. But if you're going to do that, then make sure your backup and data protection system is in place and working. Get the backups, make sure you have the policies, procedures, you're backing up correctly. And as much as instant recovery sounds delightful, it is not the silver bullet. It can actually, it can be a silver bullet, but it can be used against you as opposed to for you, right? Like, don't get hit with this silver bullet. Use instant recovery in the way that it was determined to be used, to solve one specific thing, not for ransomware attacks, not for cyber attacks. Make sure your clients understand that. Don't put yourself in a situation. In fact, document it so that you don't put yourself in a situation where you're stuck having to make really hard decisions because you didn't communicate early. And this applies to both external service providers as well as internal teams. Do not let the idea of sweeping it under the rug be an effective IR approach. It will cost you. It will cost you your name. It will cost you financially and potentially criminally, depending on what you're involved in.
Hey, Rob, I don't know if this is a good time, but there was one question that I felt might be worth you sharing some perspectives, and it was from Richard. And it was, when do you contact law enforcement, or do you?
It's not your job. In fact, here is the most candid answer I can give. You never contact law enforcement. You're not allowed to do that. That is the job of the attorney that represents the client, and that is a discussion that they need to have. Absolutely not. Oh, timeout. There is one exception to that rule. If you find child pornography on a machine, you report it directly to law enforcement. That is the only exception. Child pornography is the only exception when you go directly to law enforcement. You can talk to your counsel first, your own counsel that represents your firm first, but absolutely no. Other than that, it is the decision and determination of legal counsel on who is to be engaged in this engagement.
Thanks, Rob.
Such authority, Rob. I love the way you're delivering.
I've done this too many times.
The World Backup Day passion here.
Not that you have strong opinions on the topic at all.
I think we have time for a quick demo of the service. If anyone wants to learn more about Arcus, please feel free to reach out. But more importantly, Chris, you had mentioned showing a demo. Do we still have time for that?
We will make time. How does that sound? If I can, let's make sure my settings here are
I need to stop sharing, correct?
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
You can grab it. Yeah.
And I am just turning on my settings.
And for folks, the handouts has some nice overview of Arcus risk management, just in case you wondered where to learn more. I think we lost Chris. Bummer.
We lost Chris.
All right.
He's back. He's back.
Okay, good. I was going to jump in because I can do that too.
The key is when you have a small disaster is that you can recover in some cases quickly. Now, this is an excellent example of instant recovery. If I could get the sharing rights back, that would be, there we go. All right. And on our screen today, we should be seeing a quick flash of what looks like a dashboard with 3 donuts across the top. What I'll say, I'll just give a brief overview, touch on some of the recovery attestation side of things, and just give you a sense. And so as I guess first principles, just to kind of guide your eye. As an MSP, knowing that you've got what your inventory of devices that you're protecting, servers, workstations, Microsoft 365, having a multi-tenant dashboard where you can see your customers, filter devices based on that information, very, very helpful. And of course, the first thing you want to know always with your backup is real time. How are they behaving? And so therefore, how will, what's my ability to recover? So real-time charts, we can see 4 are currently working away, 62 are completed, and no red on the screen, so that's a good sign. But further to that, you want to have a perspective on, how's it been going over the last 28 days, last 4 weeks. So quickly, you can see if you did have something that had an error on one day, it's going to highlight that for you. So as a technician, you can see all that work of monitoring. If like here we've got 66 devices, but if you had 1,000, you really very quickly are not spending more than minutes per day on the topic of backup. And from a usability perspective, you don't need to have your top level tech talent doing the work. Also, we show a highlight with respect to time. That's another element that does become a problem with respect to restore scenarios. People will get a good backup on one day and somehow the application is removed or turned off, or the service stops, or the machine's off, and you're not getting a backup for 3 days, 4, 5, 6 days, even sometimes a month. And then all of a sudden you go to restore and you realize, oh wow, like it said we had a good backup last time it ran, but it hasn't ran in a very long time. So that's great perspective. And then of course, line by line, you can see your devices. So 2 more things I'll highlight. The convenience of not having to set up infrastructure as an initial starting place is it's just a matter of either Microsoft 365 or servers and workstations. Deploying an agent on day 1 makes it very straightforward. It's just a nice little executable. You can roll out, do a scripted rollout. So if you want to light up 100 servers or 1,000 workstations in an afternoon, that should be no problem using your software deployment tool of your choice. And then that's just going to call back and show up here for you. The other thing in terms of backup frequency, often there's a concern about, well, if you're direct to cloud or cloud first, how are you going to run hourly backups? How are you going to make this manageable across a diverse set of customers with different networks? Some are out in the country, some are in the city, some have bandwidth, some don't. The key is with respect to our secret sauce, so to speak. We call it our True Delta approach to running backups, is that on average, we're moving 60 times less data than like image-based solutions that you've seen. So we've run this in lab environments and kind of run that head-to-head. And that stat is has to be appreciated in the sense, like, we're not saying we're 10% more efficient. We're saying we're moving 60 times less data. Like that's a massive stat, and it's a true innovation of one of the aspects specific to us that makes leveraging a direct-to-cloud architecture like not only a possibility, but something that can be used as a primary, where that the mindset of having to go local first and stage it and bolt something on and get it off site, that sort of mindset was the reality, but the reality's changed. Innovation has happened, and it's a possibility that you can do this seamlessly through virtually any network. Real quick highlight. Here's a group of devices that I've just highlighted that are running once a day, and we can see in the daily backups, like there's a set of servers here, and they're moving about hundreds of megabytes of data per day typically, per backup. With Enable Backup, as we go down to running hourly, same, I got it in the wrong spot here. That same example, we can see we're being even more granular. We're moving just tens or even single digits of like megs of data. And that's really the art of solving that problem of, really large backups over really small pipes in very short periods of time. That's really, the statement, or one of the true innovations that we've brought that solves a host of the other problems that tend to come along with backup. Second piece to highlight is we do also, one of the questions is always around recovery and full system recovery. So we've built right into the system the ability to run recovery testing. With no infrastructure on your part, you could be testing and have the confidence that of the restorability of your customers' devices, servers, workstations, whatever you choose. Stefan, I know when you arrived, this was one of the areas that kind of brought you particular peace of mind. Maybe you want to speak to what your observation was coming in from the outside.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I mean, the concern was, as I kind of explained earlier, of our customers was, what if the backup catalog gets corrupted? What if the backup infrastructure gets compromised, blah, blah, blah. So it's more about recoverability check, right? And typically you do a semi-annual disaster recovery drill, and being able to have sort of an automated verdict on the integrity of the ability to recover versus the data itself, right, is super helpful. And I think this is what delivers that. So it's not the end all be all, but it's just another sort of KPI that can demonstrate if you wanted to recover this machine, you could do it. Here's the screenshot to prove it.
And naturally, of course, we give you the tools so that you can have that recoverability as standby image in your own environment, so that backups are running off site, but it's also then able to maintain things either locally or on an offsite data center or another location. We've kind of solved that problem of recovery flexibility, and so you can, based on the different requirements of your service levels that you're delivering, as well as what infrastructure you have available. We've got that flexibility to really adapt and do this in a super a transforming sort of the way people have been thinking about traditionally into this newer architecture, which not only delivers the benefits of like a quality of life and saving a whole bunch of time and being much simpler to operate, because basically we've taken a whole bunch of the work off your hands. It also really delivers on that, just on the overall cost structure. So we've lowered the COGS model, and we in turn can turn that back to you. So it makes total practical sense on both those fronts. So with that, I think we can wrap there. We had a couple of just questions. If anybody wants to find out more about Enable, certainly.
Or Arcus, there's an Arcus one too, I think, if anyone's interested.
We'll pop both those up. So yeah, if we can take a second here, if you want to find out more about Enable. And then secondly, if we can also take a moment for those on the line here, you want to raise your hand and find out more about Arcus. We'll put that one up next for folks. And just as we get to wrapping up here, certainly you can tell from Arcus, they know Rob here leading the charge, knows the business, a great resource if you are either thinking about how to be prepared or find yourself in a situation where you do need a helping hand. Certainly really great resource. I love the passion that you brought today, Rob.
Thanks,
and
Chris.
just appreciate you willing to share all your insights.
You're welcome. This was a lot of fun. I'm excited. We're all here excited about being able to help organizations. Most of us come from Fortune 100 environments or large government environments, and the idea of being able to help, let's say, Main Street with their security, risk, and compliance is exciting to all of us. So thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Stefan, any last words to sign off here on World Backup Day?
Trying to crank out those last questions, but I love the interaction. And yeah, thanks so much for taking the time. We're slightly over, but this was awesome. So really love the questions that came in, and thanks for your time.
Yeah, if there's any more there, we can probably follow up here after the event closes down. Yeah, thanks everyone for sticking around.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day.